of who the biological father of the child is, and the only way you can determine that is through a DNA, which is quite expensive. So I usually encourage our mothers to do it right the first time.
And that's a wrap for today's edition of Jamaica Magazine. Happy birthday to everyone celebrating today, and to those marking a special anniversary, we wish you all the very best. If you're visiting Jamaica for the very first time, welcome, and to those returning, welcome back home. Remember to visit our website in the meantime at gis.gov.jm for more news you can use. On behalf of the entire production team, I'm Adrian Atkinson. Stay safe.
This has been a production of the Jamaica Information Service, the voice of Jamaica.
Are you ready to make a lasting impact? Transform Life Solutions presents the Global Impact Leadership Summit, Rebuilding Jamaica from the Center. Saturday, April 4, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Garden Hotel in Mandeville, featuring guest speakers the Honorable Professor Leslie Rogers from Trinidad, Honorable Dr. Patrick Williams from Belgium, Leadership Coach Dr. Jacqueline Cousins from Jamaica. Admission is free. Hotel accommodations and exhibition booth spaces are available. Register now at www.tls-events.com. The Global Impact Leadership Summit, April 4. Don't miss it.
Tonight, can war redirect tourists to Jamaica? A claim from the Tourism Enhancement Fund that conflict in the Middle East could push travelers towards safer destinations like the Caribbean is floating out there. But what happens when the same conflict disrupts aviation, pushes up jet fuel prices, and shakes global travel confidence? Tonight, we ask whether conflict abroad can become an opportunity at home, and whether this country is ready to seize it. Also tonight, Cuba in crisis. An earthquake early this morning, a nationwide electricity collapse yesterday, fuel shortages, and no certainty that its medical infrastructure will survive the week. What it means for the region and for Jamaica. Then, when war collides with sport, Iran is asking FIFA to move its World Cup matches out of the United States and into Mexico as geopolitics reaches a football pitch. And in global current, press freedom under pressure in Washington, NATO allies refusing to join a Strait of Hormuz security mission, and a surprising new front in global wildlife crime, the trafficking of rare ants. I'm Jody Ann Quarry, and this is Lead Stories Global Lead. When the guns fire in the Middle East, tourist dollars move. That's not speculation, it's a pattern with historical precedent. The Mediterranean empties, the Gulf becomes inhospitable, and travelers who plan to see the pyramids or the coast of Lebanon begin looking for somewhere stable, somewhere warm, and somewhere that will have them. And according to the Executive Director of the Tourism Enhancement Fund, Dr. Carey Wallace, that shift could create an opportunity for Jamaica. Tourism is one of Jamaica's most important economic pillars. When indirect activity is included, from farming to transport, it represents roughly 30 to 35% of our GDP. So even a small change in global travel patterns can have macroeconomic consequences here at home. But the claim that Jamaica could benefit deserves a much harder look, because the same conflict that may redirect tourists can also push up jet fuel prices, disrupt air routes, and create the kind of global uncertainty that makes people cancel travel altogether. So, the question tonight is not whether war changes tourism. The question is whether Jamaica actually gains from that change. Now, this is all happening at the time where the United States, our biggest source market, is also having problems with their own flight out system, with TSA creating now problems for those travelers who are attempting to leave because Homeland Security isn't paying them, thanks to a partial U.S. shutdown. Let's listen to this report.
Turning up the heat on Congress as the TSA's 50,000 employees remain on the job and without pay. In a letter to lawmakers, the CEOs of the major carriers called the $0 paycheck that TSA officers received Friday simply unacceptable and warned that the failure to fund the Department of Homeland Security comes as airlines expect a record 171 million passengers this spring season. Since the partial shutdown began, hundreds of TSA officers have quit, as call-out rates have also increased significantly.
How is morale right now?
It's degrading. We're not red, we're not blue, we're not partisan, we're red, white, and blue. We're Americans. We protect the American traveler.
From Florida to Illinois, Georgia to Texas, staffing shortages are contributing to extremely long waits.
And those are source markets that Jamaica depends on. So even before we go all the way to the Middle East to see if we could be benefiting from the war now that has killed thousands there, we're still having problems with right above us. So with all of that now, and to figure out how Jamaica both has to struggle and benefit in this new global situation, I have joining me Christopher Jarrett, President of the Jamaica Hotel and Tourist Association. Mr. Jarrett, thanks so much for joining us inside Lead Story.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. A big discussion this week because Mr. Jarrett, Mr. Kerry Wallace from the Tourism Enhancement Fund has suggested that instability in the Middle East could redirect some travelers toward the Caribbean. Are you actually seeing evidence of that shift yet, or is it still in theory rather than a market trend?
It's still early days. We tend to agree with Doc. The JHDA along with JTB in partnership have been focusing for some time on Latin America and other regions, other emerging markets like India and some others. So what we have been working on doing has been, we think is going to be fruitful as this war escalates and unfolds.
When people say war could benefit tourism, and when you say it could be fruitful, what do you mean in practical terms? Are we looking at more bookings, higher room rates, or simply a perception that Jamaica is a safer option?
Well, a few of some of the things you've mentioned. We've always tried to push Jamaica as safe and seamless as far as the destination is concerned. With our customer service is one of the things that people talk about even when they're trying to choose between us and other regions. So the advantage is going to be a little clearer, we think, as the choices become more limited. The focus is going to be a little bit more on Jamaica. And with respect to the fuel prices, we think that India and some other countries like that, India, I think, just recently announced that they'll be able to go through the strait with respect to their oil movement. And so we think that although there are going to be some constriction, we don't think that it's enough right now to affect our industry here in Germany.
Well, we'll talk about some of the wider market issues, especially as we look at the Middle East in a moment. But we just played a video about our primary market, the United States, also experiencing strain with Transportation Security Administration, TSA officers not being paid. Let's talk about priorities here. Should we instead be worried about our primary market right above us, where air travel is now more difficult for Americans because TSA agents aren't working before we try to take advantage of newer ones?
Well, we're always optimistic with respect to the industry here in Jamaica. So one man's problem is another man's gain, is the way I see it here. We, although there are some problems with TSA and whatnot in the United States, again, there are the emerging markets that we are focusing on. So if it is that the market is going to shrink a little bit in the United States, I don't think it might be a little bit early for us to start panicking, because some of, as I mentioned before, some of what Jamaica Tourist Board has been focusing on for the past couple of years is just now starting to unfold. So a lot of those markets that we can now rely on and hopefully rely on as we continue into the future will be those markets outside of the United States.
I think that's important to put in context then, the sort of long trajectory that we have had. But if we're hoping to attract from these newer markets, you mentioned Latin America, you specifically spoken about one country, India. Jamaica's room inventory is still recovering from Hurricane Melissa just last year. We're now promoting Jamaica as a conflict-free destination to a new wave of long-haul travelers from the Gulf, from the India that you just spoke about, from Europe. Do we have the physical capacity to receive them at the standard, the kind of service that they are expecting here?
I think the much talked about Airbnb market has been taking up some of the slack. And because the recovery has not been quite as robust as we would all love it to be. I mean, it's been strong, but there's still not as much airlift because of the challenge with the ability to fill those, to have rooms available for those guests who will be coming in. So notwithstanding the fact that there's been an increase in the flights over 2026 to 2027, the market is growing at the acceptability, or the ability rather, for the sector with respect to hotel rooms has been keeping in step so far, it seems, with the amount of seats that have been coming into the country. And what we've been seeing too is that, if I could mention again Latin America, Colombia and other places like this are now bringing more passengers to Jamaica, more clients to Jamaica than they did last year. And so again, this is an emerging market that I think we're uniquely placed at this time to take advantage of.
Uniquely placed in Latin America, potentially expanding outside of the region in order to then take the diversion of travelers. But there's a big discussion. We have to look as well as the consequences of a global conflict, because if the conflict drives up jet fuel prices and insurance costs, surcharges on airline tickets, doesn't it make long-haul travel more expensive, potentially canceling out any of the gains that we could be seeing?
No, you're right, but we don't sit around focusing on the negatives. I mean, it's a reality that we have to consider when it happens. But for now, we're continuing to work hard, trying to position the product as a place to be. Jamaica is safe. We are away from all the turmoil, away from any other potential turmoil as they seem to be unfolding now. And so, we just continue to take advantage of that juxtaposition and ensure that we continue to try to push from the JTB standpoint, push to see how quickly the other hotels that have been damaged can get back in market, so we can continue to push for more seat capacity to come to the island.
Finally, a cynical view is that Jamaica is celebrating an opportunity that exists only because people elsewhere are dying. How do you respond to that? This idea that we're so happy to capture this market, forgetting some of the real-life consequences on the ground?
I mean, it's a reality. It's we take no pleasure in it, but everybody wants to survive. We're all in business to ultimately to make a profit. and to survive and to continue to do business and to continue to provide jobs for the people who work for us, the people who deliver the service, and so on. So although we take no pleasure in it, again, it's an advantage that we would be foolhardy not to pay attention to and to exploit where we can.
All right, President of the Jamaica Hotel and Tourist Association, Christopher Jarrett, thank you for joining us inside Lead Story. When we return, a humanitarian crisis just 90 miles from Jamaica. Up next.
Most people buy property and hope for the best. At Stella Global, we don't believe in hope. We believe in strategy. I'm Tiffany Gray. Join us March 27th through the 29th. Paradisiac Sip and See. This isn't just a tour. It's a wealth summit designed to save you thousands on your purchase. Meet our lenders, attorneys, and experts to learn how smart money invests in Jamaica. Ticket on sale at StellaGlobalRealty.com.
Jamaica's unemployment rate has fallen to 3.3%, down from 13.2% in 2016. Our government's continued focus on job creation is delivering real results. We are building Jamaica. The Time by the Office of the Prime Minister.
I'm me, the stylist, no scam and style me.
From the market to the farm to the office, money talk is everywhere. But are you making sense or nonsense? The Bank of Jamaica brings you common sense with BOJ. Real stories, real laughs, and real lessons to help you protect, grow, and manage your money. Mattress savings.
At least my mattress. You charge me to sleep on it.
Partner plan.
Remember last year we needed our payouts early? But Miss Pam gave it to her cousin first.
Or a sketchy loan flyer.
Electrifying details.
See why making the right financial choices is pure common sense. Brought to you by Bank of Jamaica, empowering everyday Jamaicans one episode at a time.
Grandpa, it's 2026. You can't keep hiding all your money in every single pocket forever.
Moving now to Cuba. And to understand what's happening in Cuba right now, you must first understand what Cuba lost in January before this year. Before this year, approximately 60 to 65% of Cuba's oil came from Venezuela under subsidized arrangements through the Petrocaribe framework. When Nicolas Maduro was removed from power in January 2026, others would call it kidnapped by the United States, that supply ended almost overnight. The United States then seized Venezuelan oil tankers that were still bound for Havana and threatened tariffs against any third country, including Mexico, that continued delivering fuel. Cuba's thermoelectric plants, already running at degraded capacity after decades of underinvestment, had nothing left to burn. What followed was a cascading collapse. By February, Havana was down to 12 hours of power per day. Rural provinces were receiving as few as 3 to 5 hours. But on the 16th of March, yesterday, the national grid failed entirely. All 10 million Cubans went dark simultaneously. Hospitals switched to generators that were themselves failing. Dialysis machines keeping people alive, with patients with renal failure are at risk of shutdown. Surgeries for tens of thousands of patients have been postponed. And then in the early hours of this morning, look at life. The earth moved. A magnitude 5.8 earthquake struck eastern Cuba. Its epicenter, 49 kilometers southwest of Macy, Cuba's easternmost point, at a shallow depth of 11.6 kilometers. Now, shadow earthquakes produce stronger surface shaking than deeper events of comparable magnitude. There was also an aftershock, 4.7, and that meant that more than 300,000 people who lived within 100 kilometers of that epicenter, they experienced it in total darkness. With no emergency communications on public power, Cuba is facing one of the most serious crises in its modern history: an earthquake, a national electricity collapse, severe fuel shortages, and rare public protests as the power grid fails. We're finding out all of this as the island suggests hospitals are operating on limited generators with critical care systems under pressure. And for the first time in years, protesters have attacked a local Communist Party office in an outbreak of public anger over blackouts. Let's hear from a young man on the ground, a Caribbean national who is over there now in Cuba. He'd spoken to us a few weeks ago. He was in Havana. It wasn't so bad for him then there. The Cuban government had prioritized giving electricity to the capital, but now no longer possible in the way that it was before. We're joined by Ricardo Lockhart here on the ground inside Cuba. Hi, Ricardo. Thanks so much for joining us inside Lead Story. All right, we are having conversation with Ricardo. He is on the ground, though, in Cuba. The very same Cuba I told you has no electricity. The very same Cuba that for the past few weeks, we've made it very clear, has had water challenges because there have not been regular power supplies that can now pump water. And that means telecommunications is going to be impacted. Ricardo, are you here with us inside Lead Story now as you talk to us about what's going on the ground? All right, we're continuing to resolve Ricardo Lockhart. Yes?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you for joining us, Ricardo. I know it is absolutely difficult for you to continue to have regular conversation out with us. First, how are you feeling? Ricardo Lockhart? All right, so Ricardo, we're going to just ask you to use audio only, given then that the bandwidth is so limited there, so that we can hear you clearly and Jamaicans can understand. So turn off your video so you can speak with us and we can hear you here in Jamaica. Ricardo is an Antiguan student there studying medicine inside Cuba. He had joined us before inside Lead Story, giving us an idea of what was going on the ground after there had now been the start of lockoffs of power supply there in Cuba. But now we're following up with him after the grid collapse yesterday and the earthquake last night. Ricardo, can you hear us now clearly? All right. As we continue to resolve the situation with Ricardo, let me take you first to what has happened, because I told you last week that Cubans were not likely to protest even with the conditions on the ground. Well, a few days ago, it became so bad that they did, in fact, protest. Let's take a listen to this as Cubans now went on the streets and attacked the communist headquarters.
Street fires raged over the banging of pots and pans. Unverified social media videos claim to show a rare outburst in the Cuban town of Moron on Saturday. Demonstrators vandalized a provincial office of the Cuban Communist Party to protest harsh living conditions, said state media. Cuba rarely sees protests, but people have taken to banging pots and pans at night to express their frustration. The U.S. oil blockade has worsened already dire economic conditions on the island, bringing prolonged blackouts and shortages of food, medicine, and other basic goods. In a statement on Saturday, President Miguel Diaz-Canel urged people not to respond to hardships with violence.
It is understandable that the prolonged power cuts as a result of the U.S. energy blockade cruelly intensified in recent months cause distress in our community. What will never be understandable, justified, or tolerated is the violence and vandalism that threaten public peace and the safety of our institutions. For vandalism and violence, there will be no impunity.
Since the U.S. capture of former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, President Donald Trump has halted transfers of Venezuelan oil to Cuba and threatened economic penalties against any countries that supply oil to the island. Recently, Trump said Cuba would be next after the U.S. war with Iran concludes. Cuban authorities have confirmed talks with the U.S. are underway, but where exactly they will lead remains uncertain.
And those talks will be important as we have seen now a complete grid collapse on the ground in Cuba yesterday. We're continuing to have Ricardo Lockhart, Antiguan student on the ground in Cuba, speak to us. But we are dealing with the reality of what's going on the ground there. That if you don't have a stable power supply, you don't have electricity being able to be produced because there have been no shipments of fuel for more than 3 months, then this is a reality that we have to deal with. So if we can get him back inside the show to talk to you about what's going on the ground there, we will. But let's also listen to the President of the United States, because he, with all the pressure that the U.S. has had and put to bear on Cuba over the past 60 plus years, President Donald Trump has now said he's happy to take over that country. But before we hear from the President of the United States, let's just give you some editorial precision here. These are public statements of the President of the United States made to reporters. Now, they've not been formalized as U.S. State Department policy, and we have whole treaties like the United Nations Charter that say that you're not allowed to threaten other countries in this way. But this is critical because the Caribbean is watching another Caribbean country explicitly now have its sovereignty threatened. Let's take a listen to what President Donald Trump had to say.
Cuba is in the dark. The entire electrical grid collapsing today as the country struggles with an energy crisis, leaving millions on the island without power. During this latest blackout, people have been spilling out to the streets here for hours. Fortunately, some cloud cover to keep them from this blistering heat. It's been 3 months since a drop of oil has reached the country. Highways are empty because there's no gas. Women are delivering babies in dark hospitals with no electricity. Conditions are deteriorating. I sat down exclusively with Deputy Prime Minister Oscar Perez Oliva Fraga, considered by many to be Cuba's economic czar. His plan to attract more foreign investors, including large companies from the United States. He says Cuba is open to having a fluid commercial relationship with U.S. companies, with Cubans residing in the United States and their descendants. This person tells me it would be a breath of fresh air. And while there are people in the United States who legally do business with Cuba, Washington's trade embargo restricts many companies from doing authorized business there. Today, President Trump was asked about taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba, I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it.
What a relationship would look like, though, remains to be seen, particularly since Congress has to vote, and many in Congress are skeptical.
I would ask and advise any Cuban that lives here or any Cuban in exile, please don't invest in Cuba. You're wasting your time.
Today, Cuban-American activists in Miami came together to send a message.
If we don't have any change in political rights, if we don't have any political guarantees, there's no economic change that's possible.
Freedom is to be able to choose your destiny. It's about Cuban sovereignty, not about business.
And tonight, those Cubans plunged into darkness will come here along Havana's iconic seawall to not only cool off, but escape the reality of the situation.
And so that Al Jazeera report has you better understand what's happening on the ground there in Cuba. But Cuba is right above us. And one of the House Republicans that was featured in that clip there is one that's known to us, Carlos Jimenez, who had comments about our own Prime Minister, Dr. Andrew Holness, when he made his statement addressing the CARICOM Heads of Government meeting in St. Kitts only a few weeks ago. So the revolving circles of people who are commenting are known to us. Now, Canada has committed $8 million in humanitarian assistance, but Canada is far away. The Caribbean's closest neighbors have been largely silent, and Jamaica is 90 kilometers away from them. The reason is clear. Washington is applying pressure that makes open solidarity with Havana a diplomatic risk for small states that depend on U.S. trade, U.S. tourism, and U.S. goodwill. That right there is a CARICOM dilemma. Not a lack of compassion, but a calculation of consequences, especially after the grid collapsed in Cuba yesterday. The crisis in Cuba is not just about an earthquake. It's about an aging energy system, limited fuel supply, and a wider geopolitical struggle over sanctions and economic pressure. Well, that keeps you up to date on as to what's going on there on the ground in Cuba. Up next, we now talk about sport and politics inside Global Lead.
Make we do the right thing. Make we live good today for a better tomorrow. Talk it out. Don't fight it out. The time by the Ministry of National Security is
6:30.
Everybody want a safer country right now.
One thing about Jamaicans, we might have differences, but we know when something is good for all of us. And when we work together against crime and violence, we are stronger than ever. And that's how we know the Citizen Security Plan can work.
That one that name CSP.
The Citizen Security Plan is an initiative of the Ministry of National Security in partnership with the European Union. It's an all-of-government effort to create safer streets and build stronger communities. Go to mns.gov.jm to learn how you can play your part.
Let's delve deep into the issues. We'll take you beneath the surface.
Greetings and salutations. My name is Orville Higgins, and it's another edition of Fan Central.
Talking to the people at the heart of the top sporting stories. Hear from your favorite sportsmen and women and the administrators who work tirelessly to make it all happen. It's live sports talk.
I've written an entire article.
Yes. Looking at all the major issues every Tuesday at 9 p.m. It's Fan Central.
Now we're looking at when war collides with sport. Sport claims neutrality. That claim has always been complicated, though. Tonight, it's in crisis. The 2026 FIFA World Cup, the largest sporting event in human history, now expanded to 48 nations across 3 host countries, is 90 days from kickoff. And the institution that governs it is caught in a 3-way deadlock from which there is no clean exit. First, the war started by the U.S. and Israel with Iran, led Iran's sports minister to, less than a week ago, say that Iran wasn't going to show up. Let's listen.
Whether Iran will actually play in the World Cup in the US, Canada and Mexico this summer. Of course, Iran at the moment are at war with the USA and Israel, and their men's team is supposed to play in the US this summer. Now, we've had some mixed messages in the last few hours because Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president, last night met President Trump. And after that meeting, FIFA released a statement saying that Infantino had spoken to Trump about Iran's participation in the World Cup. And Trump had told him that Iran would be welcome to play in the United States this summer. But just in the last few minutes, the Iranian sports minister, Ahmad Donyamali, has been speaking to state television in Iran, and he has said that under no circumstances will Iran play at the World Cup this summer in the United States.
Oh, so what do you think? I mean, that's very strong words indeed, isn't it? What do you think is the likeliest or the most likely outcome?
I think if the present regime in Iran are still in place in the summer,
then it will be difficult to see how a team representing the Islamic Republic of Iran would be able to play in the United States this summer. All Iran's games are due to be played in Los Angeles and Seattle. They're in a group with Belgium, Egypt and New Zealand. Now, logistically, I think the Iran players, if they want to play for their country in the summer, they would be able to get to the United States because FIFA and the US government have arranged for players to get special visas to play in the tournament. And most of those Iranian players play outside Iran anyway, so they would be able to go to the United States. Where I think it would be difficult is all the people who are associated with the team, who are also associated with the regime in Iran. Would they be able to get visas to go to the United States? Would they want to go to the United States? For instance, quite a few of them were not able to go to the draw in Washington in December. So as things stand, I think it's looking more unlikely than likely that Iran will be able to play in the World Cup this.
So that was less than a week ago when we now were watching the fallout from the war that began on February 28. It's now only, March 17. That means that we are now 18 days into that war. But Iran has said, hold on, because yesterday it reportedly asked FIFA to move its group stage matches out of the United States, with whom they had a problem, and now into Mexico. The reason? Security concerns and travel restrictions amid the conflict between Washington and Tehran. We had one Sky Sports interview. Let's move you to another.
Iran's Football Federation is negotiating with FIFA to relocate the country's first round matches at the World Cup to Mexico from the United States amid the ongoing conflict. In remarks posted on the Iranian embassy in Mexico's X account, Iranian football chief Mehdi Taj said, I'm going to quote here, when Trump has explicitly stated that he cannot ensure the security of the Iranian national team, we will certainly not travel to America. We are currently negotiating with FIFA to hold Iran's matches in the World Cup in Mexico. Now, just last week, US President Donald Trump advised the Iranian team not to participate in the upcoming FIFA World Cup, saying it would be for their life and safety, quote unquote. Trump's remarks came after Iran's sports minister Ahmad Doniamali said that the country would not take part in this tournament. Doniamali said the decision followed US-Israeli attacks that killed Iran's supreme leader and triggered a major regional conflict. The 48-team FIFA World Cup will be held in the United States, Canada and Mexico from the 11th of June till the 19th of July. Iran are scheduled to play all their group matches in the United States. They are set to face New Zealand and Belgium in Los Angeles on the 15th of June and 21st respectively, before taking on Egypt in Seattle on the 26th of June. Now, if Iran withdraws, the most likely replacement would be Iraq, the highest ranked Asian team that failed to qualify. However, Iraq is already scheduled to play a playoff match in Mexico on the 31st of March against Suriname or Bolivia for the final World Cup spot. But with airspace closures and visa issues, Iraq may struggle to travel to Mexico. If FIFA awards Iran's place to Iraq, that issue would be resolved. But it would create another problem. The playoff spot would need a replacement. Based on Asian qualifying standings, the most likely candidate would be the United Arab Emirates, although they too would face travel difficulties. Alternatively, FIFA could leave the playoffs unchanged and award Iran's spot to Italy instead. Currently ranked 13th in the world, the four-time world champions still need to win a four-team UEFA playoff to qualify for the World Cup.
That was Wayan telling us now what was going on there. Initially, you heard from Sky Sports talking to you about what's going on and how war is impacting football. Well, you also heard really important things as well. Iraq potentially getting a space, United Arab Emirates potentially getting a space into the World Cup, the largest World Cup ever held. both of them having a challenge. And because I have been an Italy fan since 1994, I was really excited about four-time winner Italy perhaps getting in. But this shouldn't be the context within which we are operating. And that's a big struggle here as we watch this issue, because this is something that goes beyond football. FIFA promotes the World Cup as a universal event open to all qualified teams. But host countries control their borders, their visas, and their security policies. So what happens when sport and sovereignty collide? On one side, you have Iran. Its sports minister declared under no circumstances can the Iranian national team participate in matches on U.S. soil. And so Iranian players, officials, and supporters can't enter the United States because of the current travel ban. So why should they want to be going there? Iran's Football Federation has made that formal request to move its group stage matches scheduled for Los Angeles in June and Seattle at the end of June to be relocated to Mexico. But on the other hand, you have FIFA. Well, on the other side, because you have so many hands. Its public position is that it's looking forward to all participating teams competing as per the match schedule. Relocation has been described by sources as very unlikely. But if FIFA has not explained what legal basis can compel a nation to travel to a country that banned its citizens, it makes everything more complicated. And on the third side, the United States, the host nation. The country whose host agreement with FIFA contains specific provisions requiring it to guarantee entry for all participating delegations, not just the teams that are playing on the pitch, but the coaches and everybody else. And the U.S. has not confirmed whether any diplomatic exception will be granted to Iranian players and their delegation. And then there's a second institutional crisis that sharpens the same point. Because look at how this expands. WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, is considering sanctions against the U.S. government and its officials over more than $7 million in unpaid dues. The United States has not paid its WADA contribution for 2024 or 2025. It's the largest single contributor to WADA's budget, and it has not paid. A big dispute as to whether or not the U.S. is hiding drug abuse inside its sports. But WADA has clarified that the current proposal does not affect the World Cup. But the WADA Foundation Board meets today, the 17th of March, right now, to discuss that very question. The principle is inescapable. The host nation of the next two mega global events is in financial arrears to the world's anti-doping authority. And that's the World Cup and the Olympics will be held in the United States. And this country is in active military conflict with one of its participating nations. Why does that matter? Well, for the Caribbean as well, it's important. Because Haiti is looking at participation in the World Cup, and participation lines for that country are compromised. The Haitian Football Federation cannot guarantee the administrative and logistical requirements for participation given the collapse of state functions on the ground. And that affected us here as well, with Mount Pleasant, a Jamaican football team, with Haitian nationals now having to play to a loss because those nationals could not get into the United States. The same U.S. immigration architecture that's blocking Iran applies with different criteria to Caribbean nationals. Small states don't control the rules of these tournaments, but they live entirely within their consequences. So that was helping you better understand what was going on. There's no easy answers, and a tournament that is running out of time to find them is what we are watching. Because can a host country effectively exclude a qualified team without undermining the credibility of the tournament? If FIFA agrees to move Iran's matches to Mexico, would that solve the problem? Or simply create a precedent that politics can redraw the tournament map? And what about it not being political? And who really has a final say here? FIFA as a tournament organizer, or the host state that controls entry into its territory? And why should this matter to small states like Jamaica, where us going to see if we're going to watch the World Cup with Jamaica in it or not, visa access and team mobility can shape the entire World Cup experience. Will we see Jamaican flags in the crowd? Will we be able to experience a World Cup right next door? So, as we watch all of this happen, it's important for us to keep our eyes on this, not only to see what happens in the next 90 days as the World Cup looms, but also how global politics is affecting sport. It always has, perhaps not as nakedly as this. That's us taking you through what's going on there in Iran, in the United States, the World Cup, the Olympics, everything. Next, we take you through the global current, the top 3 stories you need to know. Stay with us.
Everybody want to see if a country right now.
One thing about Jamaicans, we might have differences, but we know when something is good for all of us. And when we work together against crime and violence, we are stronger than ever. And that's how we know the Citizen Security Plan can work.
That one that name CSP.
The Citizen Security Plan is an initiative of the Ministry of National Security in partnership with the European Union. It's an all-of-government effort to create safer streets and build stronger communities. Go to mns.gov.jm to learn how you can play your part.
The internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winford Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVM TV.
So much more than entertainment.
Hi, I am Kendi Pang.
Watagwan.
Watagwan.
Datagwan.
Watagwan.
Watagwan. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 10 p.m. on CVM TV.
Datagwan pa Watagwan.
Our top 3 global stories. Number 1, President Donald Trump and the press. Donald Trump has attacked the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal for their coverage of the Iran war, labeling their reporting fake news. FCC Chairman Brendan Carr has now echoed that pressure, stating that broadcasters must operate in the public interest or face license review. Legal experts note that the FCC has not denied a license renewal in decades, and that any enforcement action would face imminent First Amendment challenges in U.S. courts. But the chilling effect on local broadcasters, particularly those in smaller markets without the legal resources of major networks, is real. And documented. Let's take a look at this France 24 report.
The Trump administration is busy calling out the press for headlines it doesn't like, coverage of Iran. The defense secretary as well proposing alternative headlines. So just in this moment in time, how hard is it for journalists to do their job under this sort of pressure?
Well, in any war situation, it's never easy for journalists to do their job, to obtain unbiased information and to install checks and balances on who's telling the truth and who isn't. And I think at this particular point in the United States, it's even more complicated. We've had these belligerent attacks against free media in the US since the Trump administration got back into office last January. The Associated Press, CBS News, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, even Britain's BBC have all come under attack threats from the Trump administration. So it's making it much more complicated for them to do their job properly. What they're trying to do is to call out the administration to find out exactly what is going on in this war in Iran. There's a couple of issues that have come to light in the last couple of days. First of all, this girls' school bombing in Iran, where the Trump administration blamed Iran for doing that, saying it was a Tomahawk missile that had been obtained by the Iranians. Then the press came along and said, well, we've been looking at this and Iran actually doesn't have any Tomahawk missiles. There's been another investigation going on, but so far the US has not said that it was responsible for this bombing raid, although everything indicates that it was. And the other one is just in the last 24 hours, there have been more attacks against the press from Donald Trump over this report that 5 US refueling planes were struck by an Iranian attack in Saudi Arabia. Donald Trump saying, no, that's not true. 4 of the 5 had virtually no damage and are already back in service, then saying the low-life papers and media actually want us to lose the war, which goes back to what you were saying about Pete Hegseth saying, well, we should change the headlines because some headlines are being too critical of the US administration's efforts. It's as if the press wanted us to lose the war, which of course is totally wrong.
And so that's President Donald Trump putting pressure not only on U.S. press, but also international media. But that's about the war in Iran. A poll released this month found that 53% of U.S. voters oppose this war. 89% of Democrats, 60% of independents. When a government moves to control the coverage of a war that a majority of its own citizens oppose, we're no longer discussing journalism policy. We're discussing the architecture of democratic accountability. The governments we have historically called authoritarian have used precisely this vocabulary. Public interest, national security, patriotism. The words are always the same. The consequences always follow. The issue raises a broader question, though. When does national security rhetoric become pressure on journalists? Moving you on now to the Strait of Hormuz and allies not getting along. The Strait of Hormuz is a waterway, roughly 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. And between 20 and 30% of all oil consumed on planet Earth every day passes through it. President Donald Trump asked his NATO allies to help him secure it. And well, look here, Germany, Italy, Greece, Spain, Australia, and Poland, they all declined. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius flatly stated, this is not our war. German Foreign Minister Wadepool confirmed that NATO has made no collective decision on the strait. But President Donald Trump has warned that NATO faces a very bad future if allies continue to withhold support, and that he will remember which countries declined. He's also acknowledged, though, that he didn't see coalition support before launching the military operation. Let's take a look at President Trump now expressing his disappointment with his allies.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday publicly pressured foreign leaders, expressing frustration. None has been enthusiastic about helping to escort oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz.
Numerous countries have told me they're on the way. Some are very enthusiastic about it, and some aren't. Some are countries that we've helped for many, many years. We've protected them.
Trump argues countries like Japan and China, who rely on most of their oil traveling through the strait, have an obligation to help secure it after it was effectively shut down by Iran. Since the U.S. and Israel launched war on Iran, gas prices have gone up by almost $1 in many U.S. states. That's 30% more than many Americans were paying just a month ago. As U.S. allies balk at sending warships, Trump had this response.
Maybe they don't want to be targeted, but I say, wouldn't matter if you're targeted or not, because this is a paper tiger that we're dealing with now. It wasn't a paper tiger 2 weeks ago.
Trump told reporters the U.S. military has struck more than 7,000 Iranian targets, destroying Iranian missile and drone manufacturing plants. Asked whether the conflict could end soon and whether he'd be willing to talk to the Iranians.
Look, all of their leaders are dead, as far as we know, but they're all dead. We don't know who we're dealing with.
The Israeli military has projected strikes on Iran could continue for several more weeks. But Trump insists Israel's not considering using a nuclear weapon should the war escalate.
Israel wouldn't do that. Israel would never do that.
Donald Trump is expected to continue his pressure campaign on foreign leaders. On Thursday, Japan's prime minister will meet here at the White House with the U.S. president, where it's expected they'll discuss Trump's call to dispatch warships to the Strait of Hormuz.
So what we're looking at then is strain in an alliance. And the result of that moment of strain is a reminder that global energy security can quickly become a geopolitical test. Finally, anti-smuggling, and a reminder that global crime is not always about drugs or weapons. Authorities in Kenya have arrested suspects accused of smuggling rare ants for sale to exotic collectors. The case highlights a growing trade in insects and other species, part of a global wildlife trafficking economy worth billions of dollars. Let's take a look.
Trafficking trends have seen a change. The focus is shifting to smaller and lesser-known species, like ants. These tiny creatures are witnessing a huge interest among traffickers. Like the 4 smugglers who have been arrested by Kenyan authorities. In 2 separate cases, 2 Belgian teenagers have been charged with wildlife piracy. They were found with thousands of ants at their guest house. They reportedly seemed distraught during their appearance in court.
We did not came here to break any laws. By accident and stupidity, we did. And I know breaking laws is for criminals, but I don't feel like a criminal.
But according to authorities, they made calculated attempts to smuggle the ants. They captured 5,000 ants, packed them in thousands of test tubes, and filled them with cotton wool. This would have enabled the ants to survive for months and obscured the contents of the tube.
Now, my director is asking me why we can't get rid of our ants here. Apparently, it's a giant ecological problem. It can collapse whole ecosystems. But also, these ants, it seems, are then creating something called biopiracy, allowing for huge species that are not meant to be in other places to be there. And people are spending billions of dollars to do that. Here's my take. Small states don't make the wars. They don't set the travel bans, they don't control the oil choke points or write the rules of the tournaments. They inherit the consequences of all of them. Jamaica is calculating whether it can profit from a war in the Middle East while the cost of flying here rises because of that very same war. CARICOM is watching a neighbor collapse in darkness and calculating what it can afford to say out loud and what it can't. The World Cup is 90 days away, and the institution that governs it has no clean answer for what happens when a host nation and a participating nation are at war. And the press, the institution upon which every other accountability mechanism depends, is being told in the world's most powerful democracy that there's a test its coverage must pass. Global instability redistributes risk, sometimes